Thank you so much to Martha Bonny and all the organizers for this amazing conference. I will take questions in French or English, français ou anglais après la présentation. I'm going to try to stick to my script because I tried to pack too much into a short amount of time, and I apologize in advance if I read too quickly. So over the last decade, we've witnessed a remarkably fast transition, as Amanda's presented us to this morning, in how viewers access and watch film and television globally, from video stores, broadcast television, or micro SD cards exchanges to streaming media. Streaming relies on data connections and the supposed 24/7 availability of film and TV on demand. Anytime, anywhere is the refrain, and more often than not, the sudden explanation for this, or the explanation for this sudden shift, is convenience. And so during my research on global platforms, especially in the Japanese I-mode mobile internet system from the 1990s onwards, I became increasingly intrigued that one of the explanations for that shift, or many others happening since then, related to the experiential side of platforms, that is, an appeal to convenience. To take one example, and here I draw in our keynotes research, I return to Amanda Lotz's Portals, in which she notes that a study about Netflix finds convenience more significant motivation to use the service than content per se. So nonlinear television also provides value to the audience through convenience that may alone be more significant than any content strategy. And I'll allow you to read the rest of the quote, but the emphasis here is on convenience. And one can speculate, and Amanda's kind of already situated her work in a kind of more historical context, that at that moment, convenience was the most thing that the audience members were most attentive to, and the author perhaps as well. But Lotz continues to insist, and I think rightly so, in Netflix and streaming video, that content times experience equals its value proposition. So we can't just think about the content of a given platform, but also the experience of it. And this experience is more often than not introduced via a kind of appeal to convenience or ease of access, many of which are synonyms for each other. Similarly, Emily West, in her book on Amazon, in which Amazon Prime Video features just a small portion, one chapter, convenience is one of the key words. So in this talk, I'd like to make the twin claims that convenience is key to understanding the current moment of media change, and that we must also develop a more specific understanding of what convenience is and how it develops in order to make this concept adequate to the explanatory weight given to it. My hope is that this grounded conception gives us an appreciation of convenience's historical and geographical specificities, and also its travels across geography. To offer both, I want to do something maybe a little unusual for this conference, and it's to look at the object of the Japanese convenience store. And it's going to do so first by offering a kind of occluded lineage. I'm going to make the argument that's kind of graphed here really quickly and very much too smoothly, that in a way, convenience stores are one of the forgotten models of the smartphone, which is also one of the influential ways we experience convenience and experience streaming, period. The next is sort of thing that I'm not going to do today, but we could also think about the infrastructural element to it. But turning to convenience on demand. So convenience was once a term associated with the home, with appliances with promises of a reduction in labor time often directed towards middle-class housewives, most especially in the post-war period. The promise of a reduction of labor time often led, as Ruth Cohen argues in her memorably titled book, to more work for mother. Convenience as a term might seem dated then, associated with the 30s or the 60s in places like the US or Japan. And yet we're in the midst of a resurgence of convenience as a term, and as also a kind of cultural analytic, at least within Anglophone media. We're within this so-called tyranny of convenience, as two critics have called it. Echoing this statement, comedian Ronnie Chen memorably asked in his Netflix special, how much more convenience can we get? And he is talking about Amazon at this point, but it is interesting that he's doing it on a Netflix special. But it's not just streaming. The convenience of getting what you want when you want it, as this article titles it, is convenience in an on-demand context, where on-demand signifies the delivery of goods or services or labor in a just-in-time manner, involving both a set of infrastructures and an organization of labor. So what's compelling to me about the on-demand as a term is the way it cuts across multiple sectors we usually consider separate. That is, ride-hailing and mobility services, food delivery, micro-work platforms like Amazon's Mechanical Turk, and of course, video streaming on demand. It signals both a temporality of consumption and a temporality of labor, united by the smartphone as an interface, and a temporality of close to immediate fulfillment, subsummed up as convenience or on demand or just in time. My argument is in part that the appliance-based model of household convenience has undergone a shift to logistics-enabled, service-centric, on-demand model. It's a model of what I term lean convenience, a term I coined sort of in reference to and in kind of acknowledgement of the influence that the model of lean, a descriptor of Toyota's just-in-time production system, has had on our current systems of both production and consumption. Toyota's so-called zero inventory, just-in-time models of delivery inform the Japanese convenience store, and what is produced at this intersection is a kind of lean convenience. I'll argue that the convenience store played a pivotal role in the semantic shift from meaning ease to meaning immediacy that comes with the shrinking of inventory or back catalog in favor of novel products and immediate access, much like streaming services today. Convenience stores are ubiquitous in the Japanese urban landscape, as well as in films like this, and television series where we see images of brightly lit franchise stores open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The convenience store's development in the US during its heyday, sort of from the 1930s was the establishment, 1960s is seen as the heyday in the US, to its further development in Japan since the 1970s, offers one lineage of contemporary convenience grounded in a sense of immediacy and access as well. In suggesting the need to look at retail, I do so not only because convenience stores are places where media goods such as film tie-ins, video games, and all else is sold, but also because of how store environments structure media delivery and consumption. In other words, the physical and design components of the convenience store are inseparable from the logistics of delivery, linking infrastructure and work organization to aesthetics and ambiance. So in paying attention to media retail, I also build on the work of scholars like Ishita Tiwari, Rahul Mukherjee, and Adrian Athik and Akshaya Kumar, who argue that the narrow focus on streaming video alone pushes out of view the cross-sectoral natures of companies like Amazon, Reliance Jio, the Indian oil-to-communications to streaming conglomerate. In this sense, as Tiwari puts it, and I quote her here, the provision of media content is only part of a larger commercial proposition, end quote. The larger commercial proposition includes everything from e-commerce to cloud computing, to infrastructures to video streaming, as represented by several of these media and cross-sectoral conglomerates. This in turn points to a limitation of much current research on streaming that takes the Netflix as a model, and this is something that Amanda has critiqued herself, and looks at instead the kind of the conglomerates like Amazon, Rakuten, or Alibaba that may be kind of the norm in across the global world. Digital global media or global media studies hence points to a crucial boundary question that all media scholars have to tackle, that is, where are the limits of what we call media and how to approach them. So that's in part the setup, and what I'll move to now is, this is a fantastic article on the Ambaniverse, the world of Jio, Reliance, and I'll look at the convenience store as one site to think about convenience and the experience that we have as a kind of way to think about what we have with streaming video. So Japanese convenience stores had their debut in the early 1970s, inspired by the heyday of American convenience stores in the 60s. In Japan, this saw the import of 7-Eleven and Lawson chains to Japan and the launch of local competing chains as well. 7-Eleven, Lawson, and Family Mart are a few of the major chains today. I'm just gonna see, yeah, okay. Over the course of the 70s and 80s, the convenience store was essentially reinvented for Japan around the provision of services and fresh foods. The specifically Japanese form of the convenience store was later re-exported to the US and much of Asia, with 7-Eleven buying the US head company in 2005, or completing its sale that it started in the early 90s. Japan has over 50,000 convenience stores operating nationwide, and an average of a person visits every 3 days, if you sort of make the count here. Convenience stores operate on a franchising model, so they're very different from the dépanneur or the bodega, which are generally family owned and not part of a sort of larger chain. The convenience store chain, the head company, is responsible for provisioning of merchandise, for developing new products, and providing an elaborate point of sales information system, and for software ordering systems that enable the store manager to restock their store. And here's a graph from 2002, 7-Eleven's information network that charts both the information flows and the flows of physical merchandise, and is based on a kind of just-in-time ordering and delivery model. Japanese convenience stores are always franchised, small in footprint, located across urban and suburban, as well as rural areas. They're also found inside metro stations, on the first floors of high-rise blocks and apartment complexes. And so this is one of the suburban locations, a metro location. Okay, I took a slide out, sorry, I'll go back. Because of this network quality, there are also places where one can pay one's gas or electricity bills, my telecom bills, deliver one's online orders to, or do any number of tasks. And so they really tried to conceive themselves as the competitor to e-retailing in the late 1990s, or a competitor to something like Amazon. As early adopters of networked digital information systems, convenience stores are nodes of delivery and also sites where multiple forms of transactions can take place, including buying insurance policies, among other things. Its integration of digital information systems makes the convenience store an object worthy of a media analysis, quite different to the more informal corner stores, dépanneurs, or bodegas in North America. It's not surprising then that the convenience store is also an early site of digital payment services from 2004 onwards, 10 years before Apple Pay launched. So this aspect of the convenience store as a kind of IT innovator since the late 1970s makes it a site from which one could write an alternative history of the internet. More recently, fresh foods have become the focus of both sales and product development, requiring 8 to 10 deliveries of foods per day, and also relying on a complex logistical systems and information traffic to make sure fresh foods are delivered on time. As economist David Marutsuke notes in his account of Japanese convenience stores, these stores borrowed Toyota's just-in-time lean management model. Marutsuke and other researchers build on the research of the Japanese scholar Yahagi Toshiyuki, kind of retail scholar, analyzing distribution, especially on this 1994 book that frames the entire industry as a system, a set of stores and infrastructures, as well as their network connectivity. So the infrastructural link between Toyota's just-in-time production system and the convenience store's just-in-time delivery system is significant. This system can be described as in terms of logistics, which is to say the coordination of circulation on which the consumer's experience of convenience depends. The anytime, anywhere availability of goods on which the convenience store depends, and the customer likewise, is only made possible by a thorough integration of logistical thinking into every aspect of these stores' planning. The very distribution of stores within city space, usually organized around like sort of triads or networks of 3 stores, is made in order to ensure savings on delivery costs and delivery times. I'll add here that this logistical optimization does not always mean perfection, and I found this just-in-time delivery hubs, etc. With Japanese convenience stores, and later with streaming services arguably as well, optimization means recognizing the value of good enough. In a convenience store, the food is good enough, not necessarily the best. Convenience often means accepting the good enough in return for 24/7 availability. Cybernetician Herbert Simon introduced the term satisficing as a portmanteau between satisfy and suffice, which is to say good enough and adequate rather than the perfect. And here's a kind of funny slide I found to illustrate this. Given the association of Toyotism with the term, keyword lean, I term this kind of convenience lean convenience. Despite the term's emphasis on time, that is just in time, the physical inventory system of Toyota was always about a kind of reduction of backlog and reduction of space in order to allow for kind of the optimal usage of space and therefore organization of space along with time. So just in time is also just enough space. Space is central to the logistical revolution of Toyotism and its model of lean production. Stores themselves have a kind of similar layout across stores, and whatever store chain you actually go into, you can find the food in the same place, and generally almost without question. 5 minutes, okay, good. I'll skip the organization of space, but there's a standardization of space that I think relates as well to how streaming is organized as well. But here, let me jump from convenience stores to streaming. So as I argued earlier, convenience store chains are relevant to digital media studies, in part because of their early adoption of digital information systems. But I'll jump to another element here as well, which is as models for the smartphone. So iOS and Android were explicitly modeled on the immensely popular iMode mobile internet system, a kind of walled garden experience of the internet that was delivered via Japanese flip phones launched in 1999 by Japanese national telecommunications company NTT Docomo. So I deal with this more in my platform economy book, but there's a crucial connection to the convenience store that I want to draw out here. I sort of reference this in passing in the book and don't really spend as much attention on it as I think I should have. And given the kind of time constraints, I'll just note that Docomo Vice President Enoki Keiichi, along with a few others, was responsible for conceptualizing the iMode system and points to a kind of parallel between iMode and convenience stores. PCs are like department stores. They have a wide selection of content, including excellent graphics. If you decide to make a visit, you can have a good look on offer. Mobile phones are more like convenience stores, where only a selection of goods are on display in the limited space available. The contents have to be simple, but the convenience comes from the fact that they can be accessed at any time. That was the starting point of the iMode business system. And Enoki likewise believed that if, quote, if we could concretize the Japanese convenience store concept in iMode, it would become an engine for its success, end quote. The very success of iMode may be testament to the fact that he's correct. Of course, iMode was replaced by Android and iOS since then. But insofar as smartphones like Android and the iPhone were modeled on the iMode and iMode was modeled on the convenience store, we might say that convenience stores are an obscured model for the smartphone, full stop. Here, the spatial compression of the convenience store with its limited inventory but always-on availability is translated into the smaller screen of the smartphone and its always-with-you portability. Remember, too, that smartphones are a sole access point for streaming content for many people around the world, especially in the kind of infrastructurally dependent data-first infrastructures that South Asian scholars describe and are made possible by companies like Reliance Jio, as well as in the Chinese landscape, as well as in Japan to some degree, with UK's important caveat that most people look at television screens aside. Like Netflix and similar to Enoki's vision for iMode, most streaming services expect users to give out some vast archive for instant access, balancing a paucity of their selection with the convenience of their availability. The catalog of Netflix, composed of 3,000 to 6,000 titles, is not so unlike the average stock of a convenience store, which is at 3,000 items. What matters in both is the convenience of on-demand availability more than the selection per se. That's not to say content doesn't matter, it's just that good enough content is good enough. We can counterpose this to a kind of maximalist vision of content of inventory that Amazon e-commerce promises, the kind of A to Z model. Likewise, both the selection and content of these streaming services is good enough and not, generally speaking, the best. We can even use think about, let's say, the generic layout of aisle design and so on in the convenience store as a kind of parallel to the uniformity of icon design in many streaming services and a lot of the kind of pirate services that try to now mimic streaming services layout. And here I'll just wrap up really quickly by ending with the diagram that I started with, which again, it excludes a lot of historical circumstances and transformations, but that in some way, maybe the convenience store can be food for thought for some of what we describe as the conveniences of online streaming today, and give us one point from which to think about what convenience means at what point in time and to what degree. So thank you all for your attention. And put this back on.
For questions. So,
okay.
Oui, merci beaucoup pour ta présentation. C'est super intéressant.
Je me demande, parce que bon, on fait le lien entre le concept de convenience et de la manière dont les plateformes fonctionnent en ce moment, mais est-ce qu'il n'y aurait pas un niveau où on est arrivé maintenant où it's not about convenience anymore at all, avec la fragmentation, avec la multiplication des sortes de plateformes? Si tu veux écouter un film, ben, il faut que tu regardes, OK, Netflix, Amazon, est-ce que c'est sur Crave TV ici? Là, mon chum, il est américain, il y a Hulu, il y a Max, il y a, tu sais. Et donc, c'est rendu tellement compliqué qu'on perd un peu cette idée de convenience-là. Je sais pas si...
Oui, oui, non, je pense beaucoup de ça. En effet, est-ce que je peux répondre en anglais? Ouais, okay. So it's a great question about inconvenience of the fragmentation of media services. So there's too many to keep track of, and how, in fact, maybe we're over the era. And I wanted to talk to you, Amanda, about like what you think of the convenience element of Netflix. I think it's both. I think you're totally right that there's a way that now things like Apple or Apple Plus or Apple TV try to be aggregators for other streaming services, and so now we're getting these kind of meta services that gather together your viewing library and other things, and so and Amazon is a kind of now both its own library but also access to channels are attempts to sort of re-centralize and offer that kind of like you only have to go in one place, but that there is an inconvenience. And so one of my questions too in this project is like, has convenience ended, or like what the duration of convenience is that these are offering, and are we now more in a kind of brand conscious, like I like to hear the Apple sound at the beginning of the episode, that kind of affective mode more than a mode of convenience. But thank you.
Okay, je vais donner la parole à Kevsar en premier.
So building on that, is there, what do you think about VPNs? Is it like a new way of monetizing convenience, or is it just a flux and influx of inconvenient becoming convenient again, and then it will come back to being inconvenient?
VPNs? Yeah. VPNs never work for me. I was saying, like, I try to use VPNs that give me access to Japanese content. So maybe I'm trying to access the wrong country, but it just never works for me. So VPNs I use when I pirate, but I don't know. Like I'm not. Yes. But maybe you can talk a little bit. Like, what are you thinking that?
For me, VPNs are great because it gives me back that power of convenience. I always use VPNs when I'm on Netflix, for example, because I'm originally from France, and in France I have access to nostalgic content like Friends, and I don't have that in Canada. So I know that I can go back to France and enjoy my usual content. And I also use other websites that list countries in which the content I'm looking for is, and I just use my VPN to access that. So for me, VPNs are very useful in that they give me back that convenience.
I'm going to ask later for your VPN recommendations, because I would like some. Okay, thank you.
I just was really interested in what you just said about maybe us moving more to an affective or back to an affective mode from a convenience mode.
Yeah.
And I would just love to hear you expand on that.
Well, I guess I would also say I wanted to think of convenience as an affect as first and foremost as well, and I think that's the bit of the experience part that your work gets at, and pointing us back to experience as thinking about like why do we come to these services. I would just think about them as different affects, and maybe even there's like a certain like a visual organization that lends you to think about convenience to something like an aesthetic, and whether there's an aesthetic of convenience. And I was partly using the convenience store to get to an aesthetic of standardization that may help us also just read the standardization of icons in a lot of the streaming services. But I'm moving farther and farther away from your question. So it was a bit about like the experience. I think of what, why do I watch particular things, and I think that almost the intro sound is another part of the like affective cushion or something that the enjoyment that you get from a particular branded entertainment, and yeah, so I think affect is a huge part of why we watch, and in a way why we use particular different streaming services. But yeah, I don't know if it's exactly replacing convenience entirely, but yeah.
Il y avait une question derrière.
Oui. So, like, is the wish for convenience that people have a key for success for services like pirate services such as IPTV, for example? Do you know what I mean by that? Like,
No,
so,
sorry.
So IPTV is very popular in Belgium now, and maybe in some countries in Europe. I don't know how popular it is here in Canada, but it's a meta platform that people subscribe to, and so they pay like $10 per month, and they have access to everything. And actually, people in Belgium, they call it the platform. So it's
I see.
and it has everything from Netflix, from HBO, and so its servers are located, everywhere, and that have hold all this. So it's actually a way to retrieve this convenience, but in a obviously illegal way, and in a way that is very it provokes damage to production, obviously, because it doesn't contribute to it. But yeah,
I have no additional thoughts, but it speaks to the fragmentation question really well, I think. And yeah, thank you.
So we have time for one last question. Yes.
So the use of convenience goes way back, actually, to the television when we revolutionized. And I think there, what I'm recognizing was the degree to which these technologies simply made television and film as accessible as other media had been. Like, so if we think about print and our ability to buy and own and have books, to buy and own and have albums that allowed us to play our music whenever we wanted, that capability had not really existed with television. A little bit with box sets, and more so with film and DVD. And so I don't know that convenience was the best word. At that point, there were three things. They all started with C, so maybe that's where I landed.
Yeah.
But I think what you're teasing out here looks to me a slightly different thing, and that's interesting. But so don't get too stuck on anything I said a long time ago.
Okay. Well, I was looking back at your television book and also thinking about, because you do go a lot more in depth there, but then you're saying that was more about ownership in a way.
Well, it's like convenience that means access. Right? The friend's point, like, for those of us who are a certain age, like, you just couldn't watch the thing you wanted to watch. Like, it just didn't exist. It was here and it was gone. And so part of what these technologies have given us is simply access to it.
Access when you want it. I mean, I think that the when you want it part, or the temporality of access is what makes it convenient, and ultimately, like, why I keep coming back to this word, imperfect may be, but But maybe I'll just end with that. I've seen other people describe retroactively technologies like, I often use my colleagues Charles Ackland in relationship to the Blockbuster, who he's talking about television in the 50s or 60s as being convenient. But I wonder how much it's influenced by, let's say, our understanding of convenience today as a desirable feeling than the historical validity of that use of the statement in terms of television. But anyway, thank you so much.